Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to learn a little more about the Thomas J. Watson Fellowship. My name is Nate, and I use he, him pronouns. I am the Associate Director of Data and Systems in CLBR, a 2016 Reed grad, and the college's Watson Liaison. The Thomas J. Watson Fellowship is a one-year grant for purposeful, independent exploration outside the United States, awarded to graduating seniors nominated by one of 41 partner institutions. This fellowship is a rare window after college and pre-career to engage your deepest interest on a global scale. Fellows conceive original projects, execute them outside of the United States for 1 year, and embrace the ensuing journey. They decide where to go, whom to meet, and when to change course. They do not affiliate with academic institutions and may not hold formal employment. Today, we'll hear from 3 recent Reed Watson Fellows about their experiences. Joining us today, we have Rod Driver, class of 2019. Rod is a nonfiction cartoonist who writes about social movements. His books are about Indonesian collective art organizing, 19th century Canadian utopian communes, the dams of the Columbia River, and his own life. He's currently organizing an artist exchange between Seattle's Short Run Comics Fest and Yogyakarta, Indonesia's Yogyakarta Comic Weeks. As a day job, Rod does the books at his family's dental office and bartends at a local theater. We also have Alisa Chen, class of 2021. Alisa is an educator who studied anthropology at Reed and completed their master's in education at Stanford. Their Watson Fellowship explored youth education and ice hockey across 5 countries as a coach, player, and spectator. Ladakh, India was their favorite destination, and they're planning to return there as a coach for the 3rd time next winter. Alisa currently lives in Washington, D.C. Stevie Hoesel, class of 2022. Stevie is a community and policy advisor at Youth Law Autoria. As a Watson Fellow, she researched global responses to youth incarceration and recently completed a Master of Public Policy thesis on the minimum age of criminal responsibility and decolonial approaches to youth justice. She brings experience in grassroots organizing, policy advocacy, and international justice reform. Thank you all so much for being here. And we're going to go through some questions now about your experiences as applicants and fellows. And the last 15 minutes will be reserved for Q&A from the audience. So first, Rod, let's start with you. Why don't you tell us about your Watson Year project? What did you do?
Sure. So like I said in my bio, I'm a cartoonist. My project was called Making Comics Together, and it was about cartoonist communities. So communities of purpose in Germany, Japan, Australia, and Indonesia primarily.
Great, thank you. Moving on to, we're going to go in order of years that you did your Watson is what I've got things listed as. So Alisa, why don't you take that next?
So from my application to my actual project, I was interested in using ice hockey as a lens into sociocultural norms, and broadly, like why do we do the things we love and how do we make those things worth it? And my application is very focused on gender dynamics. And then during my actual year, it was more about youth education.
Great, thank you. And Stevie, tell us about your Watson Year project.
Yeah, my official title was Global Interventions in Youth Incarceration. And I visited 4 countries officially dotted around within those regions, looking at how different stakeholders, this just means different groups and organizations engaged with the topic of youth incarceration from prevention, intervention, and reintegration.
Great, thank you, Stevie. This one's a little more in depth. What were the highlights of your Watson Year? What were some of the challenges, anticipated or unexpected? Rod?
This is corny, but the highlight is just the friends I made along the way. Just you end up making some really wonderful connections, and that I continue to be able to collaborate with some of these people, like my current project of bringing together Yogyakarta Comic Weeks and Short Run to have this cultural exchange between 2 different comics fests. And yeah, couldn't have done that without the Watson. The thing that that always sticks out to me in terms of challenges is just there's a lot of boredom. And then I personally felt really guilty whenever I was bored or didn't know what I was going to do. I'm like, oh my God, I'm squandering this amazing opportunity. So I you just have to try to remind yourself that the scope of the Watson year is a lot longer than you would say if you were going on vacation, and that it's also a lot less directed than, if you were working a job or going to school or something. And all of that free time you can really get in your head about it. And it definitely requires a degree of grace and patience for oneself.
Oh, thank you, Rod. Alicia, what were some of the highlights of your year, some of the challenges, anticipated or unexpected?
Yeah, Rod, I totally agree about like the boredom and like that sense of like directionlessness almost that comes with it. Um, for me, an unexpected challenge was definitely just that. I had this week in Northern Ireland where I was like, I need to leave this country. Like, I cannot be here right now because it was just like so intense. And I felt like it was because of the place. And um, I just felt like I wasn't like solving anything. Uh, Even though I had a year between when I graduated and when I did my fellowship because of the COVID pandemic, I still very much had this academic mindset about how I was pursuing things and thinking like, oh, I have to like, be figuring something out. I have to have like some clean conclusion at the end of this. And in the following weeks after that, like really negative week I had, I stayed in Northern Ireland and I was kind of like, what if I just, had fun and saw like where that took me. And like took that pressure off of myself because the foundation is definitely not putting pressure on fellows to do anything like that. Yeah, and then similarly highlights definitely the people that I met along the way and the kind of moments that were like so specific to the experience I was having. Um, like if I had to choose a favorite memory, I skated this half marathon on a lake between the Tibetan and Indian border, or like on the border. It crosses between both. And it was just so cool. And it was totally because like I knew a guy who knew a guy, and like my friend was there with me, and um, just like a total Watson moment.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Alicia. Stevie?
That's so cool. Let me just start there. Um, I'm just going to support what's already been said about the friends and the networks and communities. This is how I met my thesis supervisor and my current job. I think another thing it was a challenge, but also maybe kind of one of the greatest strengths coming from the Watson was that almost all of my assumptions, even about the world, were kind of challenged. It sounds pretty dramatic, but the topic was quite heavy, youth incarceration. And so there was baggage that I was bringing to the table in like more than one way. And so, yeah, I think the Watson helped develop a confidence in kind of sitting in nuance and uncomfortable situations, as well as that self-direction. And also, Alicia, what you said about the challenges as well. I was like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Oh, thank you. So now the application a bit, like in what you remember of it, because it's cool, it was a bit ago. Um, but yeah, what was the application process like for you? What was helpful to you and what wasn't when you were going through that? Start with Rod.
I did work on my application very intensively. I think I heard about the Watson the previous spring, so I pretty much worked on it all throughout the summer, got tons and tons of eyes on it, and I'm still pretty proud of it. And one thing that really helped me was I read so many past Watson blogs, and I would definitely recommend just it for prospective Watson scholars getting your eyes on as many old blogs or old records of previous Watson trips as you possibly can, because that will give you a really good sense of what you're in for, and it'll also uh, give you a sense of here's what I'll be practically doing on a day-to-day that you can show to the um, Watson Foundation when you apply.
Thank you, Rod. Alicia, how was your application process?
Yeah, definitely. So I knew about the fellowship my freshman year because I had a senior friend who had become an internal nominee. So I had known about it for a long time. And I was very much like, what do you mean they just give you money and you like it's like travel for a year? And so when it came time to apply, I'd been thinking and I actually had a totally different project idea. And something that was really helpful for me was talking to people who knew me really well. I talked to my mom a lot about my project and getting that kind of both like insight into what like other people felt like I could do really intensely for a year and thinking like how I felt about that. Um, like for example, my original project was not about ice hockey, and my mom was like, "Why are you doing this like random thing? How are you going to be able to do it for 12 months? Like this seems like so out of left field." And now in hindsight, I'm like, she was so right. Other things that were helpful, getting essay feedback from people. Back when Shania was at CLBR, she read my essays a couple times, and that was super, super helpful. And later in the application process, practicing interviewing was extremely important for me because, like the day before my Watson interview, I had called someone who had been awarded the fellowship the year before me, and he was like, "Oh, let's practice interviewing." And I was like, "I don't want to do that." And then he was like, "No, let's do it." And I realized I was like so unprepared and like self-conscious about it. And having that like 12 hours to like, be with that feeling of like, I actually do need to practice was really helpful. Unhelpful things, stressing about things I couldn't change. My year, it was like fall 2020. Everyone I reached out to was like either didn't reply, most people didn't reply, or they would be like, oh, like reach out in the fall to see like if things are different with COVID. And I was just so stressed about that. And I was like, this is like totally like, I'm never going to get this scholarship because I just don't have the context that I need. And it was fine, but it just like put like a very dark cloud over my entire application process.
Yeah, once again, maybe it's because we were in like very similar years. But I think there's a lot of, I felt a lot of pressure to have like a perfect application in terms of contacts and like exact plans. And at the end of the day, they all changed. And that was fun. They were kind of looking more so for the logic of how you would go about choosing in the first place, how you'd go about gathering the contacts, that kind of thing. And also similarly, big shout out to the Center for Life Beyond Reed. Nate mock interviewed me as well, and I was unprepared for it, and I was a little panicked. Shania like grilled me. That was helpful. I also had a different project idea, and kind of it felt like I had changed it at the last minute. And maybe this goes into a little bit of something else, but I just tried to find like the through line between all my different project ideas to figure out what I was genuinely interested in. And at the end of the day, that's what the Watson's going to really be looking for. So similar to what was already said about kind of this like academic coming from Reed specifically, this like really intense academic lens kind of goes away. And what they're going to want to know is also like, what do you think about when you're driving and when you're sitting on the bus? Like what are the common themes? What's the thread? And so those are the kinds of things that you're going to need to speak to, as opposed to like cite a theorist that could back up like the logic of what you're doing. And so taking that pressure off as well and trying to enjoy it a little bit, like also thinking about it as this is something that could come in helpful if you're applying to anything in the future, and also quite an introspective process. So it didn't feel like it would be a waste if I like wasn't awarded the Watson. So if possible, try to enjoy the process and like think about the details, but also like that's not going to be the end all be all if you think that you can't get certain contacts.
Great. Thank you, Stevie. And as we go too, if any of you has like a question for each other of the Watson panelists here, like feel free to jump in. That is fine. So yeah, this next question, we've kind of touched on it a little bit, but how did you come up with your project idea and flesh it out?
Oh, I'm glad that we're doing this question now because I was like, oh, I still want to talk about this like idea, this project idea creation phase after how I heard Alicia and Stevie talking about theirs. which by the way, Shania fan club all around. All of us were helped out by her so much. But like I generally think about my Watson year, which was such an important life experience, and I'm like, oh, it was so obvious. I've always been a cartoonist. Like it's like I've always been interested in this kind of community, of course. But I actually did not think of that right away. I was thinking about all kinds of other fellowship options, and my mom reminded me that when I was like a sophomore or freshman at Reed, I'd been interested in doing a um study abroad in France with the intention of finding like French cartoonist community. And she was like, "Oh, are you still interested in that? Do that." So I'd kind of forgotten about it. And then I ended up doing it. And yeah, developing my project idea. I think my the bulk of my project idea was this idea that I would be interviewing people and eventually doing some kind of comic about it. And that's a tricky one because the Watson is not about making a final project, but I think I kind of needed that final project just to give structure to the experience. And it gave me structure to my days of it gave me a concrete ask when I was reaching out to someone that to me was a little bit easier than like, oh, let's just hang out. I'm yeah. And I found my project countries kind of through just chance. I like I said, was originally interested in French comics and Belgian comics as well as manga. I did go to Japan, but it wasn't and it was a good experience, like a good Watson experience, but I didn't have that many contacts there. And I never really found any contacts for French comics, really. Maybe a couple people in Belgium. And my big break was at my local comics shop. There was an event, and someone introduced me to a German cartoonist, and so I started then working my way through her network and eventually kind of hopscotched over to some other colleagues she had in Southeast Asia. And that's how I ended up learning about Indonesian comics, which ended up being the most fruitful area and where I found the people who were most open to sharing about their comic scene. And then Australia, I actually checked that out on the recommendation of another ex-Watson, Miyuki Baker, who I was reading their blog a lot at the time. And I pretty much just went and copied what they did because they were also doing zines. So a little bit rambling, but that's how I got all my project countries.
Thanks. Yeah. Oh, Alicia?
Yeah, for me, I was like, what is like the most interesting like use of my time that I could think of. My original project idea was about like backcountry, like off-grid communities. And then the second part that was like important for me, right? So the first part was like, what do I think is going to be really interesting for a year? And then the second part is like, what do I feel I can confidently do for a year? And when I talked to my mom about my original idea, she was like, I don't want you doing that. And also like, um, like you're gonna get bored. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I guess I can't really think of like what it would be like to do something like that for 12 months. But hockey is like something I played since I was a kid and something I really missed while I was at Reed and in the beginning parts of the pandemic. So that was like a much easier project for me to flesh out both mentally and to write out. And then as for like countries list, honestly, there were countries I really wanted to go to just for personal reasons, like Iceland and Hong Kong. I was just like, I really want to go there and spend like significant time in these places. And I just like made my project fit into them. And it was still like very fruitful. And then other places just made sense for like my topic, like Canada and Sweden. I always knew I was going to go to. And then India was like a total wild card. I had read this New York Times article about hockey in the doc, and I was just like totally blown away. I read it like 3 years before applying. And then, funnily enough, my first week in Canada, I talked to this guy who later this other guy like emailed me and was like, hey, the first guy like was telling me about what you're doing this year. And like, I know a guy who like went to India. Have you thought about going there? I was like, I have actually, and I don't have any contacts. And so like through a guy who knew a guy who knew a guy, like it worked out.
Stevie, thank
Yeah.
you.
Similarly to Rod and Alicia, looking back, it kind of seemed obvious, and I was also thinking about like I guess like both of all of us like have the theme of like this kind of looking back, and it was obvious, and having like a common history or like something that you didn't quite get the chance to explore at a younger age. I never thought I would revisit youth incarceration. I didn't want to do youth, and I didn't want to go back to the topic of incarceration. But then as I was kind of going through like my list of project ideas and talking to people more, including like poking at why I was interested in those topics, it became clear that that was also something that when I would think back, it was something that was like unresolved that I think I needed to explore further in order to like move forward in my career as well. Like Watson, the Watson year is an amazing kind of pause before you decide any type of next steps. And so, what would you need as a person to be able to kind of move forward confidently with whatever kind of path you're walking down for the next couple of years? And how I chose my countries. I didn't end up going to, I went up to one country that was on my original list. And it was also a combination of countries that were kind of obvious to the topic. So like originally thinking about incarceration, like Norway was at the top of the list. I didn't end up going to Norway, and it did end up kind of being like a snowball um, kind of method where I'd meet someone or a news article would pop up and I would be like, I need to get involved in that. Another thing was that I would talk to people about the country list, and um, there was advice about maybe you should actually go to places that have completely disparate ideas of philosophies of justice, essentially, and also different cultural contexts, like challenge yourself. Um, so that's kind of how that worked. In retrospect, like the process itself was quite chaotic. Like now that I'm looking back at it, there was not a semblance of organization. Um, yeah, yeah.
Thank you, Stevie. I liked what you said there about the Watson year is a pause where you can take that time to figure out what you need to move on from that year. Yeah, that's a great way to talk about it. And something I've heard from you all a bit about when you're talking about your project ideas is talk to people who know you well, especially. It sounds like they can be some of the most valuable people to help you see whether or not that's something you actually want to do. Thank you. Last question that I've prepared for you all here. What is one piece of advice you would give to your past self at the beginning of the application process?
Um, I was thinking about this in advance, and I'm actually very happy with the way my application process shook out. But one regret that I have, it's gonna like sound so silly and minor, but you got to be really comfortable with the cold email, and I think we all already know that. But for me at the time, what I wish I'd known earlier was don't be so apologetic with your cold emails. Like just cut to the point. One detail that I keep remembering is that I would sometimes for a couple of people include the line like, thank you for your time, even just the time it takes to read this, because I thought it was too presumptuous to think that they would actually take the time to respond or help. And it's like, no one cares. Just just have a nice, concise, cold email. So that's like my one regret for the process, honestly.
Oh, that's so funny. And Stevie, I'm thinking about like the application. My application was also really chaotic. And I remember like up until the last minute I was like working on my contacts list and I was like, this is so not gonna fly. Like this is it, guys. Like it's not gonna work. Um, obviously it was fine. But my one piece of advice would be that um to make a project that really feels like your own. I spent so much time feeling like I had to make a project that was like for some sort of um, like end goal. And from having talked to people like at the conference and people from the foundation now, I know it's totally just like an investment in you as a fellow. And had I not been so worried about like creating or producing something, I think I would have had a lot more fun, definitely in the application process and also definitely during the year. Um, Yes. And then Stevie and Rod, I have a follow-up question. Did either of you talk to anyone at either the Returning Fellows Conference or just like from the foundation broadly after getting the fellowship that gave you like an important insight? Because for me, I met one of the people who was on, okay, so for people who might not know, after you do your fellowship year, you have a Returning Fellows Conference, and it's like everyone from that year like meets, and it's extremely cathartic. It's like one of the most like fun couple of days I've ever had. It's just like you went through that too, you know? And I met one of the people who was on my application review panel, and he was like telling me about other people who had applied with projects about ice hockey and like why they didn't choose those projects. And then he was also telling me about when he read my countries list, how he thought like nothing, like he was like, this is a horrible project. Like it's totally not going to work this way. But just seeing the research I'd put into for hockey in India and like my genuine, you know, like interest in how it came across, he was like, if Alisa can do just like this one part, like it will be worth it. Which is funny, right? Because now it's like I'm going to India for like the third time next winter. Like those are like some of the closest people in my life, who I was coaching alongside. And I mean, he was right. So
Thanks, Alicia. And I wish, because I'm 2019, so I did not have a returning fellows conference. Like we had a Zoom fellows conference, and I think I was there for, I like watched some of it, but like I didn't really contribute to it. I don't think I had that experience at all. And one thing that I'm actually thinking about as we're on this Zoom call right now is I just love like hearing from you and Stevie right now. And I do have that feeling of like, oh yeah, we have been through the same thing. Because I think when I was actually on the Watson and immediately after, I was also doing that comparison thing of being like, oh, everyone's out here, you know, solving major global issues and I'm doing my cartoons. And I think that like I didn't ever really get the perspective on that we really were essentially all having very similar experiences.
Yeah. I felt this pressure to like solve the problem on my Watson. And I thought I was gonna come back and get grilled about like what are the different methods and approaches that people are doing that have like high success rates, right? I totally thought that's what the conference was gonna be about. And I think something that previous fellows, I reached out to previous fellows after I got the Watson, who had done either similar projects or had gone to similar countries. And a lot of them did say like they're investing in like your kind of the project in a way, like your project could likely be something else and it would be fun. And they see a lot of really good, like well thought out projects, but it just has to really connect to you, like through the project proposal. They're trying to learn about you. And so think about it that way as well. You know, we spent a lot of time talking about how we didn't choose other projects, so maybe that feels a little counterintuitive, but um, yeah, I think almost every Watson also, I think something that was really helpful, at least during the Watson year, was that I think every single previous Watson fellow that I talked to was like, this is going to be really hard. And I did not think it was going to be. I was like, I just got this money. I'm going to go have fun. I'm going to go talk to people. It's going to be awesome. I was like, it's going to be hard. Like I'll miss a flight. I'll be fine. Right. But it's like, it was really hard. So also, I don't know, maybe recognize that. In my interview, the worst question that I got was like, how are you going to take care of yourself and have fun? And I like froze. I had no idea someone was going to ask me that. I don't even know what I said. I thought that totally messed up my interview. So keep in mind also like you're a whole person and they want to see that you're a whole person. They're going to ask you questions probably along those lines as well if they don't see it already in your application. I don't know, that's not succinct, but all of those pieces kind of just mirror what Rod and Alicia have already been saying. And a little insight into what they're looking for, I think.
I have a self-care suggestion too, which is take snacks or foods on all of your international flights so that when you then like touch down in a new country and haven't traded out your currency yet, you have something to eat so you're not like going, I'm so hungry, I don't know where to go to get food. That's my suggestion.
Stevie, What was one piece of advice you would give to your past self at the beginning of the application process?
I think not to, I guess, stress too much about all of the details. And like I also didn't feel like my contacts were super fleshed out and that that would be the downfall. I think I anticipated that they were going to like cross-check my references list or something. Um, and I think there's just I put a lot of pressure on myself to just somehow get it right and get it neat and tidy. If you've ever applied for like Reed's IRB process, or I was kind of thinking it would be similar to that, or other kind of applications that were academic or kind of project oriented with an outcome. Um, so I guess that the cold emailing as well. I also had those apologetic emails like, hey, don't know if you're interested, but like, here's this thing. And also explaining the Watson is like really challenging to people who have no idea what it is. So also Rod's suggestion about like maybe have some kind of ask. That's something that I learned the hard way, like halfway through the year. Because people would be like, what do you want to do? Like, what do you want to talk to me about? So maybe that.
Okay, yeah, wait, I have one more thing. With the context list, I eventually, right, because I kind of made mine over 2 years because of the year I deferred it. At the end, I was just like, I'm not mentioning like the Watson by name. I'm not mentioning Reed. Like, how do I explain this as simply as possible? What do I have to offer? What am I asking for? Like, what is the general time frame I'm thinking of? Because I only went on one phone call with a contact before starting my fellowship. And for the first 20 minutes, it was just like me explaining like the things that I had named, like these proper nouns, and she like did not get it. And then like during the year, people are gonna be like, what are you doing? And it's annoying, but it's like not that important. Like, you know, like it is important, but like them understanding it is not that important.
How did each of you like explain what you were doing to like strangers during your Watson year?
I forget. I need to Alicia.
I would just call it it depended on like who I was talking to, right? Like if it was someone I was been spending a lot of time with, I would like, you know, take the time to explain. And then if it was just like someone who's like, you know, like a teammate, and then they were like, why are you in Iceland for 3 months? Like you're American. I would just be like, oh, I have this research fellowship and this is like part of my research. And that's like a very, you know, that's like a very understandable, like satisfying answer if you can get it. Um, yeah, but trying to explain it all is like, it gets, you know, people are going to ask you a lot.
Yeah, I think I
Yes.
just said it's a, oh, sorry, research
No, go ahead.
fellowship. Yeah, my partner calls it Fulbright for indie kids, which works a lot of the time too.
Yeah, I'd say it definitely depends on like who you're talking to, and what their level of familiarity, even with like what a research project would look like is. Um, yeah, I basically said some version of all of those as well, depending on who I was speaking with. And then some people were interested in like, am I going to have to pay you? So I did some volunteering as well. A little bit of like internship and shadowing stuff. So also like if you know that they would be concerned about if they have to take care of you, it's something to flag that it's fully funded. Think about like who you're talking to, what they're actually responsible for, what would it mean for them to take you on either for a coffee, offer coffee to everyone. And yeah, think about what your ask to them specifically is, and that will help you frame how you're approaching the topic. Like if you're talking to an academic, obviously a research project is going to fly, but if you're talking to someone who just got out of prison, that's probably not maybe the best angle. In that case, it's a bit more, you might want to go a little bit more personal, like talk about like just wanting to learn more. Maybe you've worked in the space a little bit, and you have a really cool opportunity and like found them through blah, blah, blah. Um, and a lot of times I found that people were like, why are you interested in me and what do you want from me? So if you're being clear about that, like, hey, like this is what I want to learn. And also just like if you like start with the coffee or offering them to take them to lunch or something, like give something in return as well. So that was another thing. The reciprocity is really important. At least I found in my project. So that bit derailed a little bit into like more of like hacks, but yeah.
Thank you, Stevie. So we're going to move into questions and answers here in a moment, the Q&A session. If you've got questions, if you're on the call and you've got questions for them, you can type them in the chat and Natalie will read them and go through them. Or when we open it up, you can also just unmute yourself and ask. So whatever you feel comfortable with. But I've got one more for the three of you, kind of based on what I've been hearing from you. And it is, you've all mentioned chaos either in the application process or during the year at some point. And how did you take care of yourself or manage it during the year, during the Watson year, when things felt really chaotic?
At the time, I was reading a lot of fan fiction. Um, yeah, fan fiction and uh, putting snacks in my bag when I went on the plane, and um, sometimes this is like so hokey. I feel like sometimes when I was like, hungry and overwhelmed and stuff, I would do like a kind of inner child exercise, just that sort of mindfulness thing. So those are some of the things that I did.
I feel like I handled it kind of poorly, honestly, for like the first part, at least of the fellowship. I would just like panic. And I didn't talk to any past fellows before going on it, actually, and that's like probably one of my biggest regrets because I was like, oh, I feel like I'm doing this really wrong. And I didn't even like think to like reach out to people. I don't know what's going on there. Um, but eventually I figured out like if I just this is like bad advice. If I just like book a trip and like go somewhere else for a day, like reset, I want to go to this cool museum, like schedule out like a really fun day for myself. One, it gives me something to do in the moment to like plan that, and two, gives me something to look forward to, and three, like there's so many ways to make things like so related to the project in a way that like, seems to check all the bases. Um, but yeah, and then at the end of the year, I realized I had taken like a mini break between like each country, which I found really helpful to just like let me reset. Also at the end of each place, I had like really emotional, like there was always like a party or something that like coincided with like a holiday with like when I was leaving. Um, and then just like going to like a little town and like being somewhere quiet for like 3 days and like journaling, was really helpful for me. Um, But yeah, I think like the essence of all of this for me is like there's really no wrong way to do it. It's like an investment in you as a person, like you as a project. And by the time I realized that it was like quite late in the year, but like even that realization is like very comforting for me now.
Yeah, similarly, big fan, big recommend not doing your project for the weekend or something. Um, that was advice that I also got from past fellows as well. Um, and that you can't, exactly what you said, Alicia, you can't actually do your project wrong. There are people who have changed like the topic of their project like during their Watson. Um, yeah, taking some time away from the project and like letting yourself sit with everything. It's quite isolating because you're the only person who knows what you're doing. You'll meet people who are in the space, but they don't know what the Watson means. You'll meet past Watson fellows, but they didn't do what they did. I mean, if you reach out to them. So everyone only knows a little piece of the experience of what you might be going through. So kind of leaning on people traditionally like you would in like classmates or something isn't the same. But you can still gather a lot of insights and support from people who might know a certain piece of the experience. Past fellows were really helpful for when I was like spiraling about doing the Watson wrong. Um, and then people in the community, particularly people that like I took a lot of solace in like meeting a lot of like elders in the space who would like reassure me that like the world isn't completely on fire. And they would like humble me a lot, and that was really helpful. And then also like I like quite literally had to take up something like a physical activity. It was just a lot. I started boxing on my walks in year, which ended up being really helpful. Um, and also I think part of the Watson experience is also learning how to do that. Um, and developing your own way of kind of doing the self-care and managing like the chaos of life, because that's just what's going to be happening in the future as well. So having some grace for the process, letting things unfold a little bit naturally, and also knowing who you can kind of lean on for what. And also to like ask for help when you need it. This was also like one of the most important parts of my Watson. Um, I didn't necessarily reach out to the Watson Foundation themselves, although they are also like so willing and able and ready to help. Um, but just like letting people know, like at your in your space is like, I'm feeling so pessimistic about this right now. This feels really existential. There's a lot of dread that's happening, and then also a lot of times people would be like, "Oh my gosh, you should talk to this person." Um, yeah, there's more support, more insights, and also a lot more sharing that people want to do, and people want to connect. And so connecting over those experiences of like just like vulnerability is also really helpful for everyone involved.
That's great. Thank you, Stevie.
Alisa, can I just wanted to second some of those because Alisa, I also did the side trips or weekend trips for just a couple of days for each of my project countries, and those were some of my favorite times of the whole trip. And Stevie, yeah, too, having some form of exercise. One thing that was a struggle when I was in Indonesia is that the streets aren't really great for walking, which is usually one of my like favorite calming things to do. So I also started doing a little bit of yoga, but being able to walk and being able to have that physical outlet was really good.
Yeah, Stevie, what you said about like taking up like a side hobby or like a hobby is, I totally feel that. Like I took multiple art classes just to like have something to do on like a weekly basis. I think in general, like post grad, it's good to have things that are like regularly scheduled that you attend and it's like the same people and you don't have to like plan it yourself. Yeah, like volunteering or like a hobby that is like that. And I played rugby in a bunch of places just to have something to do that wasn't like, necessarily about my project.
Great. Thank you all so much for going through our questions. Yeah, does anybody on the call have any questions for our panelists today? You can unmute yourself again or ask them in the chat, and we'll wait a moment while we see.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, at first I just want to say thank you all for sharing. What do you think the most common theme and like the ideas and the character of the candidates that the Watson Foundation chooses? And why do you think they chose you specifically?
I think that there's a couple of factors, obviously, but I think what appealed them to me maybe was that it was clearly a lifelong interest. They want to see that it's an interest that you've been fostering for a really long time, even if it takes you, talking to someone close to you to realize it and kick it off.
Okay, I actually kind of know why they chose me because I talked to that guy who reviewed, who's like on my application review panel. And I also met the person who interviewed me, like I met her in person. And yes, so my project was labeled, I think there's like a couple categories, but my project was like labeled personal pain. It was like something that, again, right, was like something I'd been, like dealing with my entire life or whatever. It's about ice hockey, but my application was like a lot about my family. And I think that was like very distinguishing, right? That I had this like idea that was like about who I was, but like rooted through an activity. And then when I talked to the person who was on my application review panel, he told me that they had seen some other applications that were very like in vibe, like similar to mine, like about a sport or about hockey specifically. But like something that was interesting for them was like the connection to like my life. It wasn't just like, oh, I've been doing this for a long time. It was like, oh, and here's like how it's like impacted me and like these things that I'm still like dealing with. And like, I don't really know what to make of it, honestly, but like hopefully I'll figure it out. Like if you give me the scholarship. Yeah, and I think most people, I'm trying to think of the folks I met at the conference. And Stevie, I'd love to hear what you think of this too. But I remember thinking my year there were so many public health like oriented projects, and I was like, how did this happen? And then like I met everybody, and I was like, whoa, like I get it. Sorry, I was judgmental. And right, like I think everyone I talked to, there was like, at face value was like, yeah, like, cool project. Like I get why this was like something that was interesting. But then like talking to the people who did it, it's like this is so like about like your life in a really intense way. And like such a like I really think each project it has to be like about you. Like it can only be done by you, it can only be yours.
Yeah, similar as per to both of you. Um, I heard a rumor before I applied that like they literally look at the list of characteristics like for the humane and effective leader thing, and they try to find evidence of that in your application and interview and like literally tick it off. I don't know if that's true. Um, Another thing, but that's something I heard, so I like tried to be mindful of that. Another thing that I actually currently have a Watson fellow who's interning for me at Youth Law. And something that we were talking about recently was that Sneha from the Watson Foundation said in some way to the fellows that a lot of people follow their pain, but not their purpose. So if you're doing a project that's also deeply personal, like also make sure you're including that um, element of it. And similarly at the returning fellows conference, and I also like have happened to pick up Watson fellows, like younger Watson fellows along the way as well. Um, Everyone is so incredibly different and has different interests, different political views, like everything, like the entire spectrum exists within Watson Fellows. So there's not a specific person they're looking for you to be. But I think the one thing that really did strike me was just like curiosity. And everyone that was at the returning fellows conference was like genuinely curious about other people. When you're in the small groups and stuff and you're talking to people, everyone was like really engaged and present with everyone. And maybe that was like just this kind of a symptom of like having gone on a Watson year perhaps as well. um, but you could tell they're like really about their project and about like learning in general, I think. um, but not from like an academic lens, although a lot of people did go academic. And in my year there was a lot of environmental people, and I also was like, oh, it makes sense because you know what's going on with this particular policy. But then similarly I was like, oh no, this is something else. There's a through line here with the kind of individuals. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think another thing that obviously like you have to like they're looking for in candidates is like your ability to actually do it. Like genuinely, it's just like such a big task. And at CV, similarly, I was like, oh, this is like the hard part's over. Like I got the money, like I'm gonna get on this plane, it's gonna be easy. And then it was so hard, but there was no point where I was like, I gotta go home. And I remember at the conference, I was like asking people, like, you were like on the verge of death. Like, were you like, I have to go home? And they were like, no, like I went to the hospital and then I went back. And there's only one person who like actually did go. This is just to say like, right, the point is to show that you like have a project that you're really passionate about and that's like so uniquely yours, but also that you are like deeply capable of doing this like kind of monumentous task and of enjoying it like along the way. Because you do really have to dig deep during the year. And I don't know, I think a lot of people would have a lot harder of a time doing that than like the people the foundation picks.
Thank you all. Thank you, Caitlin. Does anybody else have any questions for them right now? And also, if you have questions for each other that were popping into your head while you were all speaking, feel free to.
For the sake of maybe everyone in this room, I'm not entirely sure where you're all placed, but did either of you, Rod or Alicia, consider other fellowships? And how did you choose to invest time into Watson? Um, post grad? Did you feel like a pressure to just go straight to grad school or to get a job?
I was pretty much like, if I get this, I'm going to just go do it because it's so amazing. My backup plan was just to do this internship at this cartoon studio in Portland called Helioscope. Um, and I, ended up doing this and was pretty happy with it. And then, my life sort of just crashed during the pandemic anyway. So, road not taken.
For me, I had applied to grad school and funded higher education student affairs programs. And then I didn't do that because I got the Watson Fellowship, but I did defer for a year. I think the majority of people my year did. And so when it actually came time for me to be like, okay, I have to get on the plane, I was honestly, it was really hard for me because in that year, I'd like started a job I really liked. Like I was living in Portland, I was very happy. There were like personal things where I was like, this feels like the wrong time for me to be doing this. But right, they didn't let me. Like I didn't ask actually. I was like, I have to do it now if I'm gonna do it. Um, and I was carrying honestly a lot of grief like my first couple of months. And that was really hard for me because so much of the fellowship is like, you're gonna meet new people, like hopefully you like them. And I was like, I do not need to meet new people. Like I do not need to do that. And so that was difficult. And um, that year of being accepted as a fellow and then like getting on the plane was really hard for me because I was like, why would I give this up? And in hindsight, obviously, I made the right decision. But yeah, I definitely struggled with it. What about you?
I was all over the place with what I wanted to do. When I graduated Reed, I was thinking about like I was taking like LSAT, LSAT. I was doing like the prep books. I applied to Fulbright as well. I was all over the place. I was also kind of thinking about what what the best steps would be in terms of like needing financial security. How was I gonna like, make sure everything was taken care of? But I ended up, yeah, not taking those routes and putting more energy into the Watson because similarly, I was like, also, when am I going to get this type of opportunity again? Like, even if I go to law school, I go to grad school immediately, or I get a job immediately, when am I going to have the opportunity to take an entire year to do something that, something like this? And also thought about it as like an investment into like your future practice of whatever you're doing. And someone told me like, law school can wait, the jobs can wait, but like the Watson's not going to come again. Um, and also saw the process of applying for the Watson as it's very time intensive, like a very time intensive. Um, I saw that process as like no matter what, that's going to be advantageous for whatever you apply for in the future as well. So I tried to like weigh up all of the options. But yeah, and then when I talk to people who have applied for the Watson now, because I maybe made the mistake of like throwing out my email during like a big Watson Foundation induction, or like kind of like info session like this. So I've talked to a lot of people that are applying for the Watson. Um, uh, yeah, they have similar kind of are fighting for like there's a lot that's fighting for your attention. Um, so that's why I wanted to ask. Everyone's going to come to it differently, but yeah, it's giving great opportunity, can't pass it up.
I think what I also it was also very just practical for me with it when it came to Watson versus Fulbright or another similar program is that the Watson is you can only apply for it when you're a graduating senior. So just based on how strict it was on that, I'm like, well, better do it this year then.
We also have a question from the chat. So Meredith is wondering, how did you go about finding your contacts in each country? Which is honestly something that I've always wondered. And I know you've talked a bit about like the cold emailing, but just in terms of the research.
Do you have answer, Alicia?
Yes. For example, in Iceland, I knew I wanted to go to Iceland and I Googled women's ice hockey Iceland. And the first email that came up was the person I worked with for 3 months. So sometimes it's really just like, who's going to respond. And then sometimes, right, it's like that example about India where it was like, I talked to a guy, I like barely mentioned India. And then this other guy like emailed me and was like, do you want me to put you in contact? Like, I found that people were very excited. Like the people that wanted to help were very excited and eager to help me connect with other people. Um, and so like once you're on the road, it's a lot easier. In the actual application process, I got extremely few responses to cold emails. It was extremely discouraging. I started calling people, and that also didn't really work, and was kind of like a last minute effort. Um, so I don't have too much advice on that, but just like don't give up. Keep your emails simple. You don't need to explain everything, and anything positive or any kind of positive response is like a good indicator. And right, yeah, just like don't put too much pressure on yourself with that.
Yeah. And cold emails. A good cold email though sometimes can go a long way. So also you have someone else look it over maybe. It's cold emailing, and similarly, like literally with youth law, where I also work now, that was the first organization that came up, Youth Justice New Zealand. But then I would also just talk about the countries that I was going to frequently. Like the summer before I left for my Watson, I was working like as a barista, and like with the customers would talk about like what I was doing. And I met this guy who was like Norwegian, and he was like, "Oh, my uncle actually runs that prison," right? So and then there was just like, so I was like talking to people a lot as well. And people tended to be really curious, or if they were from there or had a friend in that area, I would like text them. Social media stalking, and then like trying to find the right person, DMing people. A lot of people I know actually reactivated like their Instagrams and stuff to like talk to people from Watson, or like one of their contacts as well. So also don't be afraid to like get creative with like reaching out to people, whether it's calling them or like how you find them or message them. But having someone who can like be your in is really helpful. If it's someone that they already know and trust, you're a lot more likely. So also like think about like 2 degrees of separation. It's still worth like investing in that person and like talking to them about your project. And they may know someone who knows someone, and that's sometimes like enough. And it also only takes like 1 or 2 people to start like kicking things off as well.
Great. Stevie, thank you. Stevie, Rod, Alicia, thank you so much for joining us today. We are at time, so we're going to be stopping here. Yeah, just so proud of you all and so happy that you all took the time to come and like talk with us today and to talk to future readies who might see this and maybe take a little inspiration from it. Um, we're here in the Center for Life Beyond Read, and we have advisors that can help you. You can find us on Handshake anytime. We work all year round. So if you're thinking about an idea, no matter what your class year is, come and see us, and we'll help you think about it and help you work on the application, whatever you need. Um, yeah, thank you to Natalie for running the chat and the questions, and thank you to Sarah Schriebert on the list here for helping me with all of the organizing ahead of time. Yeah, thanks so much, and I hope you all have a great day, evening, morning, wherever you are.